Welcome to the IT Smart Guy podcast, a technology podcast aimed at the modern business. Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the IT Smart Guy podcast, the tech-based podcast for the modern business owner. My name's Tony, and in today's episode, I'll be talking about some tech-related outcomes from the King's speech, which took place on the 7th of November, focusing mainly on news around autonomous vehicles and encryption. We then have our first interview for a while as we welcome Stephen Hackett of 186 Cloud to the podcast. We're going to be talking all things telecoms and the big switch off. And then finally, as always, we'll have a tip of the episode. Let's jump straight into the news, shall we? Let's look at what's happening in the news. So to start with this time round, we're going to jump straight into a significant development in the world of autonomous vehicles. This is being brought about by legislative changes introduced during King Charles III's speech. This pivotal legislation signals a potential green light for fully autonomous vehicles to operate on UK roads. Under the proposed laws, manufacturers would bear liability in the event of a driverless vehicle crashing while operating in autonomous mode, thus granting immunity to individuals in the driver's seat. Now, this transformative legal framework, known as the Automated Vehicles Bill, empowers the Department for Transport with enhanced authority to certify the safety of autonomous vehicles. The British government anticipates substantial economic growth in the autonomous vehicle sector, estimating a market potential of up to 42 billion and the creation of 38,000 skilled jobs over the next 12 years. Notably, the bill's provisions would facilitate the deployment of Level 4 autonomous vehicles, characterised by a high degree of autonomy, eliminating the need for a safety driver. In his inaugural King's speech, Charles III highlighted the significance of self-driving vehicles, digital markets and machine learning. He affirmed the government's commitment to enacting new legislation to foster the safe commercial development of emerging industries, with a specific focus on self-driving vehicles. Citing data that attributes 88% of accidents to human error, the government contends that self-driving cars will enhance road safety significantly. They assert that the bill will offer the private sector the certainty and confidence required to spur research, innovation and investment throughout the UK. Professor Paul Newman, CBE, co-founder, CTO and president of British driverless vehicle setup OXA, emphasised that the bill will establish a clear framework for defining responsibility and accountability among the various stakeholders essential to the widespread adoption of self-driving vehicles. In addition to the autonomous vehicle legislation, King Charles also touched upon the government's intentions to introduce a framework for digital market competition rules and encourage technological innovation, particularly in the field of machine learning. The government is also gearing up to provide law enforcement agencies with new legislative powers to combat technology-enabled crimes, acknowledging the rapidly evolving security landscape driven by these new technologies. Furthermore, the King reaffirmed the United Kingdom's commitment to lead international discussions on the safe development of artificial intelligence during his speech, referencing the government's AI Safety Summit. From driverless cars, we are going to stick with things coming from the King's speech, but we're moving on to concerns from tech companies like Signal regarding proposed powers that could potentially grant the UK government the authority to intervene and impede the implementation of new privacy features within messaging apps. Now, this news comes from an article on the Financial Times website, and it is something we've talked about on the show before. So, the IPA, the Investigatory Powers Amendment Bill, as outlined in the King's speech, seeks to compel companies to notify the Home Office in advance of any security or privacy enhancements they intend to introduce to their platforms. This includes things like encryption. Currently, the government possesses the capability to compel telecoms firms and messaging platforms to provide data on national security grounds and to cooperate in criminal investigations. This new legislation aims to recalibrate these powers in response to perceived risks posed by multinational tech companies launching services that obstruct lawful access to data, all in the name of public safety. Nevertheless, concerns and calls for clarity have emerged. Meredith Whittaker, president of private messaging group Signal, has urged ministers to provide more details on what she terms a bellicose proposal. She fears that if enacted, the legislation would empower ministers and officials to veto the introduction of new safety features, potentially stifling innovation and service integrity within the UK. Prominent players like Meta and Apple, providers of encryption in WhatsApp, iMessage and FaceTime, have all expressed their willingness to withdraw services from the UK if the government seeks to compromise these essential security features. Meta, for instance, plans to extend encryption to Facebook Messenger, which enjoys a substantial user base within Britain. Whittaker emphasises the importance of enhancing privacy settings to safeguard core technical infrastructure from malicious actors. She contends that this fundamental principle is not adequately understood by those who are advocating these changes. She also points out a lack of judicial due process in the government's approach, which she finds deeply alarming, but not entirely unexpected. Tech UK, a prominent trade group, has also voiced its concerns, suggesting that the envisaged investigatory powers legislation could potentially compel companies to comply with Home Office warrants to hand over user data, even during an ongoing review of the request's appropriateness. Julian David, who is the chief executive of Tech UK, highlights the need for more meaningful engagement between the Home Office and businesses to address these concerns effectively. These recent threats by tech companies to withdraw services is part of a broader backlash within the sector against various government policies, including the recently passed Online Safety Bill, which tech groups argue undermine privacy and the integrity of their products. Apple, in response to the legislation, has warned that certain elements of the investigatory powers bill could force tech companies to withdraw critical security features, thereby depriving UK users of essential protection. WhatsApp has also indicated its intention to exit if compelled by the government to compromise encryption. The Home Office, however, defends the bill, asserting it will enable intelligence agencies and law enforcement to keep pace with evolving threats and to protect the public from criminals. It emphasises the support for strong encryption as long as it's balanced with public safety and not outsourced to unaccountable multinational companies. This debate raises significant questions about the delicate balance between privacy, security, and intervention in this digital age. So that's it for the news this time. How about we get on to the interview? The interview. So we now reached the interview part of the podcast, and today I'm really happy to be bringing onto the show a chap I've known for 4 or 5 years now, on and off. A guy called Stephen Hackett of 186 Cloud. We'll bring him into the studio now. Hey Stephen, how are you?
I'm very well, Tony. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. As I just said in the intro, we've known each other on and off for a good few years now, and it actually feels like it's been ages since we've actually had a proper catch up. So it's great to see, albeit.
Yeah, I think that's the problem of the world we live in now, isn't it? That this work from anywhere means we work where we prefer to work, and often that means we don't get out as much. And I'm I'm guilty of that, right? I value my time so much now that I spend a lot of my time in meetings using technology. In actual fact, I remember a few months ago, somebody said to me, "Hey, why don't we meet in London for a breakfast?" And my time's so valuable. Time spent traveling is wasted. And I jokingly said to him, "Do you mind if I send you an invoice for £1,000 at the same time?" And he said, "How come? What are you doing for me?" I said, "Nothing, but you're using my day."
Yeah.
Because time's so valuable now, and we pack so much into it using the technology. But the flip side is we don't get out so much.
Absolutely. So I'm going to dive straight into the first question. If you can just tell the audience who you are and what you do, that would be a great start. Bit like
Yeah,
mine.
so I'm CEO of 186 Cloud, and 186 Cloud is, I like to call us a number of things. We're a market analyst for technology. We're an advocacy practice. We're also a partner ecosystem and mentor stroke incubation business. Essentially, what that means in real terms, in modern money, is that we build an ecosystem around four technology areas. We cover unified communications and collaboration, networks and connectivity, cybersecurity, and cloud compute. And cloud compute generally is everything that doesn't fit into the three other areas, but our business partners still find useful. And what we do is we find, recruit, maintain, mentor, and incubate partners that want to get access to those technologies, but more importantly, want to understand how they can learn the talk tracks to take them into conversations with customers. And we teach them all of that, and we join them in customer conversations. We teach them how to do discovery and develop opportunity for the vendors and engage the vendors into those conversations.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I've worked with you obviously in over the last 4 or 5 years in various guises, not only in my own business but obviously in the business I was in before. And yeah, everything you've said there, nutshell. Yeah, you've given so much. So firstly, I want to say thanks because partnering with yourself and the other vendors that you've brought into that ecosystem have essentially helped me build the business to where my business is now. So thank you so much.
Hey, no, appreciate it. That I always say, without you, we're nothing, right? Because we exist for you. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
So let's start with a bit more of a backstory. How's your career progressed to bring you to where you are now, running your own business?
So I'm going to get into story mode and tell you kind of like going back 10 years. 10 years ago, I just left working for Gamma, selling some cloud, but some on-prem technology, some kind of like data center based services. I moved into my first single cloud solution employment opportunity, and I went to work for Enfon, so selling cloud telephony. And it's at that point that I started Enfon was the first brand that I'd seen come out of nowhere, right, in the cloud. But I started to look around and see other brands in the cloud coming out of nowhere that I'd never heard of. And I started to experience conversations with customers where they were talking about traditional communications technology platforms. Example, Avaya, Mitel, Panasonic. And they were asking questions about why should we be looking at cloud versus our on-prem technology. But with every week, when every week would pass with a new cloud vendor coming along, I could see that there was going to be a time, probably not so far in the distance, when cloud vendors would be more common than historic, what we now call legacy on-prem technology. But I could see there was going to be a problem with that because customers would have a challenge, and the challenge would be they wouldn't know who these vendors were and the technologies, and they wouldn't be able to evaluate them and interpret their value and importance to them. So I could see that there was going to be an opportunity to help customers, I guess, look at the market, research the market, understand the market, engage the technologies, find the technologies, identify the vendors, and engage them. And so I started a business for an American organization called Intelisys. So we brought the first iteration of what the industry used to call the master agent model. Today we call it technology services distribution. We brought the first iteration of that model to the UK. And I ran that business for 2 years. We sold it to ScanSource 2 years later. 2 years later, ran it for another couple of years as ScanSource, and it was then that I could see the next opportunity. And the next opportunity was that there were competitors in the market. There were the likes of Avant and Telarus in the market, all pretty much doing the same thing. What I call being a clearinghouse for vendors, engaging vendors with downstream partners and helping them get access to those vendors for their customers. But I could see a bigger opportunity. I could see that partners like yourself, Tony, needed more help with those vendors. They needed help understanding what the vendors do, how the vendors differentiate from each other, how they should engage them into their customer opportunities, how they should even find customer opportunities that would match those vendors' capability, and how they would learn the talk tracks and take those talk tracks into conversation with the customer. And so that's what 186 Cloud was about. So that's what we launched 186 Cloud in October 2020. We've been doing it 3 years. And essentially, that's what we do. We help partners like yourself become relevant to customers and stay relevant by continually bringing to you technologies and vendors, leading vendors that will make your conversation with your customers easier and more meaningful, providing them with value.
Brilliant. You've summed that up really, really well. I wasn't quite sure how far back you were going to go.
Well, I did at the start, Tony. I said, you let me tell a story and I'll tell a story. And sometimes I have to listen to this little voice in my head going, get to the punchline.
Yeah, I think we've all got one of them. I definitely do, because if I start talking about various things, then people are like, shut up. So you mentioned a few things there, on-prem to cloud, and then how we've moved from even just talking about unified communications 5-6 years ago was some radical thing, but now we're in this work from anywhere, people being able to answer calls wherever they are, have video calls, all from a single platform, and it's almost like it's that's natural. What do you think is coming? What do you think is going to come next? Obviously, we've got the big switch off that all the telcos are pushing again in 2025, and from some of the stats I've seen, there are still quite a lot of businesses out there, especially the smaller ones, that haven't yet made the jump. How do you kind of see that happening over the next 18 months or so? Just to throw a curveball question in there.
It's not a curveball. It's a really relevant and important question. I think there are actually three types of customers for unified communications. We call it UCAS, Unified Communications as a Service. So it's UC in the cloud. UC, Avaya have been doing unified communications, and Mitel have for years, right? But it moved to the cloud, so it became as a service. But I think there are three types of customers for this service out there. There are those you just mentioned, who are facing ISDN switch off, or they've got an aging legacy on-prem technology that is end of life, or they've got a technology that doesn't suit their current style of work, i.e. it's an on-prem office-based telephone system that allows office-based people to communicate with each other, or will forward their calls to their mobiles when they're not around. Right? That technology doesn't work anymore. So that's one type of customer. And I think what's happened is that technology has been reaching end of life. The pandemic told them that it's not suitable for a modern work style. ISDN switch off was the final nail in the coffin. ISDN switch off meant that they were trying to sweat the asset for as long as they could and get away with forwarding calls to mobiles, but eventually they realized it's landfill time for that technology, and they've got to replace it with something that's more relevant, because the connectivity, the ISDN infrastructure, the analog lines that used to power it, essentially make it reachable by the rest of the world, it's not going to be there anymore. It's being switched off as the campaign says. That's it. That's one type of customer. So they've got to move, right? They've got no choice. They've either got to move or they've got to upgrade their existing tech to SIP trunk, being SIP trunk capable. But what's the point if they're going to do that if it's not suitable for a modern work style, or if it's a legacy technology and they're going to invest more money? So they might as well move to the cloud. So that's one type of customer that we're all looking to help. The second type of customer are those customers who maybe moved to the cloud 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Maybe they were early adopters, and they've now got to the point where they're looking out to the market and asking themselves, is there anything more out there? We've been a customer of X vendor for the last 3 or 4 years. we've had an okay experience. But what else is out there? So they're keen to learn about, where unified communications, UCAS, can take them. And then there's the third type of customer. And this is the third type. The third type of customer, I think, are the pioneers using the technology to really gain competitive advantage in the business. And that is those that have really looked at how the technology can help them. They can use the technology, to leverage their strategy, become more competitive. And they're now looking at what more the technology can do. So they're saying, what about integrating a contact center experience into our UC platform? So we're enabling our customer facing people. And I'm not just talking about people who work in call centers, but I'm talking about anybody across the organization who is customer facing to use the features within the tech that will make them more efficient. I mean, I point to the phrase on my t-shirt. Everybody's talking about AI today. So, they're all starting to ask questions. How can I make my UCAS experience more meaningful to my organization using things like AI? So they're the three types of customers that I think we're looking at and that we can be helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think there might be even a fourth
Go on.
category of customer. So again, I've heard a stat from somebody I know who's an international coach. He's saying that on average there are anywhere between 50 and 70,000 new businesses being started in the UK every month.
Yeah.
And they're going to be looking, or they should be looking for, a local presence number or a national based number, because let's face it, there are so many. You see it on the road all the time. Men with vans, mobile number, at Outlook or at gmail.com email addresses, and then their website. And it doesn't scream a professional outfit. It screams, I'm a one man in a van.
Yeah.
Whereas just by tweaking that message, you can have, your domain, your web address, info at domain name, and then a local or a national number if they're aiming to be national, and it just takes that company to there, up to that level. And obviously with all these new businesses coming in, they're bootstrapping a lot, which is where some of the UCAS elements can really work well, because it's a one price per month every month, and it's not going to break the bank. Whereas, getting a mobile, you look, if it's a half decent mobile, you're looking on a business plan anywhere from £50 to £70 a month.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. The problem with a lot of those customers, and you use the phrase yourself, bootstrap, is that they've got to keep the cost down, right? They've got to minimize their costs. So unfortunately, sometimes it leads them into technology acquisition with the wrong aim in mind. Their aim is probably be reachable, but make it cheap.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right that cloud means that they can identify their monthly costs and get an idea of what it's going to be, and they can probably go and acquire themselves a vendor for their technology without committing to long-term contracts. They can even do it on a monthly basis. But I do think that they need to be approaching it even at a startup level, on a strategic level. From that perspective, they need to be thinking, where do I want to be in 3 years? What sort of size organization do I want to be? How many towns and cities do I want to be present in? Is this a lifestyle business, or is it a business I want to scale? And think about the technology that they're going to be using to help them get there. It's people like yourself, Tony, that I think are the custodians for that sort of journey, because you really are in a position to be able to say, let's not just think about your telecoms. Let's think about your CRM. Let's think about your marketing. Let's think about bringing all of those three things together. So your customer journey can be digital, whether it's voice, whether it's SMS, whether it's via the web, or it's email, or it's social media. Let's bring all of those together into a single portal almost. And if you think about it, these people out there, they're plumbers, they fix washing machines, they run coffee bars, restaurants, etc., etc., etc. They have no idea about this tech. They really do need your advice to help them build this strategy, this idea of the art of the possible. And that's where you come in, to be what I like to call, agent provocateur, because you can afford to be provocative to them and say, this is what I think you're saying you want to achieve, but what if you could do this? What if you do this? What if you do this? Because you know the technology, you know the vendors out there, you know what is possible. They don't.
Yeah.
What you want to hear from them is, that's amazing. Who does that? How can we do that? Well, the answer is you. You can build that for them because the vendors and the tech are out there.
Yeah. And I've done just that recently with an estate agent. Again, just starting out. Just what to start with, he just wanted a phone number, and we've grown it from being just a phone number to so much more. And there's stuff in there outside of the ucaas discussion that we've built in as well. So hopefully they'll scale as I scale.
Yeah. Why not? Technology is ubiquitous. It's not geography dependent anymore. So as they scale, it should be just a case of them. If you built the right solution for them and you've given them access to the right tech, the right vendors, it should be just a case as they scale, going, have three more of those, three more of those, three more of those, please.
Yeah.
And everything's joined together.
Yeah. So we've kind of touched on this already, but why should businesses be looking to change the way that they communicate? It both from an internal perspective and from an external perspective.
Yeah, that's again a really good question, because there was a time when we'd think about the way businesses communicate and we'd think about it as you've got to have communications technology because you've got to be reachable. And then we went through this thing called the pandemic, where businesses were overnight told, get out of your offices, go and work from home. And they had no time to put in place technology and customer experience based solutions that would enable them to continue their business in the way that they've been used to for the last 100 years, being based in an office, everybody commuting into a city to collaborate inside an office and be reachable via their customers, whether it's an office or a shop, etc. That's how they did it, and they had no time to change the way they were doing it. So they had to survive, right? And so people did things like we mentioned earlier, forwarding the desk phone to mobile and using their mobiles, using email, and discovering Teams or downloading the free version of Zoom. And they managed for, what was it? Was it nearly 2 years on and off? The problem was that we got to the end of the pandemic, and when people like ourselves then started speaking to them about, hey guys, you've got ISDN switch off coming around, maybe you should look at that on-prem technology and get rid of it and get something more 21st century. A lot of them will be responding with, we don't really make phone calls anymore. What do you mean don't make phone calls? Well, we kind of, exist on mobiles and email and Zoom. And so they'd fallen into the trap of believing that their customers didn't want to contact them on the phone anymore. And that wasn't the case. It's just that customers were forced down this route of how to communicate with them during the pandemic because everybody was in the same boat. Yeah. But really, customers want to speak to their supplier of whatever services they were acquiring from them. And those organizations that saw that were the first ones to say, you know what, our work style has changed, our business hasn't changed, the way we do business has changed, and we need to adapt to it. If we want to outcompete our competitor down the road, who are saying we use mobiles now and email and Zoom, etc., we don't need telephony, well, that's on them. But we see there's an opportunity here to be more reachable by our customers. Let's get the right tech in place. So I think that's why organizations that want to get ahead need to get the right communication strategy in place and start to ask themselves, how can we use today's tech to leverage our business strategy and outcompete, the people behind us? I think I heard a story. We've probably all heard this about the two guys in the jungle, and they hear a tiger coming through the woods, and one of them puts on his trainers. And the guy says to him, I don't know why you're putting your trainers on, because he's going to catch you. He'll outrun both of us, whether you've got your trainers on or not. And he turned to his buddy and said, I'm not trying to outrun the tiger. I'm only trying to outrun you. It's about, outcompeting your nearest in this commercial world. He had the foresight and the technology, the trainers to do that. we're in a position to help our customers do the same with communications technology.
Yep, I couldn't put it any better myself. And it's funny how you mentioned the pandemic and things changing, because obviously prior to going alone, I was with a company, and we were partners then with Intelisys/ScanSource, and we put in a UCAS solution at head office, which meant that we had not only telephony, but we had instant messaging, video already. So when the pandemic hit, it meant for the week before I got furloughed, obviously, people could communicate with me as if I was in the office, and
Right.
there was no difference. Whereas before we'd put that in, we were using a ShoreTel system.
Yeah.
Okay, it had presence, but that was it. There was,
Yeah.
it was essentially, you couldn't really use it on a mobile because the mobile app was a bit rubbish.
Right.
There was no video, there was no instant message, so we're using a Slack-esque type platform for free internal messaging rather than sending emails all the time. But having that single application with everything in it just made the world of difference for those few months when I was using it.
Yeah, and that again,
still use a similar solution in my business now, even though it's just me.
Yeah, and again, that's important. That you select a vendor whose applications are a single stack, right? It's their own technology, their own platform. It's not different vendors cobbled together for many reasons. We heard of a vendor last year who seemed to be single stack, but they were using somebody else's software for their mobile app, and their mobile app was vulnerable and got hacked, and it put the whole vendor's reputation at risk. Equally, it needs to be scalable. So the technology needs to be available to organizations, whether they're one employee or 10,000 plus. Because the one employee organization, you don't want them to have to switch technology to another vendor as they grow. The vendor needs to be able to go on the journey from 1 to 10,000.
Yeah. So let's change tack slightly and talk about yourself and your business. How's the way you work changed? Oh, let's go back from the days of when you first set out on your own to now. And how has how's the technology changed? And what technology are you using now to effectively communicate with your prospects, clients, suppliers?
Well, you think that I'm based in an office out in Suffolk, right? When we started the business from home, and during that first 6 months of starting the business working from home, I remember thinking to myself two things. One, if I can make this business work during these times, then it's going to be successful during more buoyant, positive times. And secondly, I thought, wow, what a great time to start, because I can remember being based in London and spending my day running around London, going to see customers for partners, to show partners how to have conversations with customers, and almost being part of their team. Really, that's what we do. And I spend a lot of time in front of customers, and those customer meetings were expensive to get to, expensive to spend time at, expensive to get home, and a lot of them, because it's sales, right, would come to nothing. They'd be long-term conversations, or you'd find out that the customer had changed their mind and they weren't going to move, they were going to stick with their existing tech. So you'd invest a lot in customer conversations. The use of technology means that we're only now investing our time. We've already committed to the monthly spend for the technology, so we're committed and we're spending on it. The investment is the time with the customer. And what it means by using the technology is we can have more meetings. So we got to the point where, because our time is valuable to our partners, we want to be able to spend as much time with as many partners as possible, scaling what we do, that we push back where necessary on face-to-face customer meetings, on face-to-face partner meetings, for the sake of having a coffee, let's say. So now we actually we ask ourselves, what is the value in getting together? If we can do it using the technology, let's do it using the technology. Not only for that, but because we can document it as well. So the technology and I'm answering multiple questions here, but the technology that we first started out with was very simple. We used internet connectivity. We had a CRM, and we had a couple of UC licenses from one of the vendors. And we used telephony for ingoing and outgoing calls. We used Teams for our meetings because it was the platform of choice. Most people want to meet on Teams because it's free. And then the connectivity was a fiber to the cabinet connection. The one thing we did do, because our business was dependent on our connectivity, was get to. Now, we don't live in an area where we have two different networks, so we couldn't get an OpenReach one and a Virgin Media Networks one. So we did at least get two different service providers on OpenReach. So we got one BT and we got one with TalkTalk. So for a while, we had two fiber to the cabinet connections. And what we did is we connected one of them via Ethernet cable up to our office. So we had a hardwired connection so that we got the maximum amount of the bandwidth. Recently, what we've done is we've got rid of one of those, and we've finally got a fiber to the prem provider here. So for the same money as we were spending on the FTTC connection, we now get I think it's a 900 meg download and about 100 meg upload. So it's a fantastic connection. But we still have the backup TalkTalk because broadband does go down sometimes. Funnily enough, I got a notice from the fiber to the premise provider only an hour ago saying we're going to be offline from midnight tonight till 6 a.m. At least it's out. It's out of but at least we've got a backup. So, and the other thing we've done, so we managed with those technologies for a couple of years, but because we wanted to make a maximum use of our time, and we're in front of our customers, in front of our partners, and to be able to leverage the time spent, we also invested in transcription technology. So we use a thing called Otter.ai.
Yep.
What Otter enables us to do is Otter will join all of our meetings, and Otter transcribes all of our meetings. And what we will then do is take those notes and drop them into our CRM. So, and often we use those notes to create reports back to partners and customers. We said we're going to do this, we covered this, etc., etc. The notes are available. No, I'm no longer spending time in meetings like this as I'm writing. I'm fully functioning and conversant because I know the technology is taking care of it for me. So we're trying to automate as much as possible now.
Nice, yeah, and I've seen your note-taking app in action in a Zoom call a couple of months ago, and I've tested it myself. So it's something that I'm looking at doing as I do video more. Again, it's never perfect, but 90% there is better than some of my handwritten scrawl. So
the other thing we're using more video. So not just video for meetings, but video for education. So at 186 Cloud, we run a thing called Tech Talk. And essentially, Tech Talk isn't like as we're doing here. It's not an interview. Tech Talk is where what we're doing is we're taking our vendor webinars and then we're chopping them up into pieces. So that we're chopping them into pieces around the subject. So a webinar could be around one major topic, but they might discuss different areas of the topic. So we're chopping them up into consumable pieces, and we're front-ending them with tech talk, a video, an introductory to X by 1x6 Cloud, and then we're doing the video there. And we're making all of that available on the website for education purposes for both the partners and customers. So we're using video more as well.
Brilliant. So my second to last question: what's next for you, and what's next for 186 Cloud?
Next for me is always making sure that we are relevant for you, right? So and again, I go back to the phrase I said earlier: without you, we're nothing, right? So we always have to make sure that 186 Cloud, we're focusing on what is coming next. We'll mention the three technologies that we're working on. UC and collaboration. We have a really good vendor ecosystem. Anybody who's identified by the analysts, whether it's UC, Unified Communications, or CC, Contact Center, they're in our ecosystem. So whether it's Gartner, IDC, Forrester, for example, they're in our ecosystem. It's a complete set, and we can talk about all of them and help you in conversations. Connectivity. We're focusing more on UK connectivity providers that provide fiber to the premise, so the altnets. So we're the only one in our industry that has BT has had BT as a vendor for a while, but we've got people like gigabit networks who can give access to fiber-based networks all over the UK and in London. Um, that's in the connectivity space, and we're building in the cyberspace because the massive opportunity, I think, for the next couple of years post ISDN switch off, when that's done, is starting to grow now. It's been growing for a while, but it's becoming really, really mission critical for customers. Is having good cyber in place. A lot of customers, a lot of IT directors, I believe, have got a challenge, and their challenge is they're not sleeping at night, and they're not sleeping at night because they're worried about when the big cyber attack's going to happen, that's going to get them, the organization, in a lot of trouble. Either a ransomware attack where they're being forced to, they've got to choose between paying the bad guys or telling the bad guys to sling their hook and somehow recovering their data, which will be difficult. Um, or whether it's some sort of other cyber incident that they're not prepared for. And the challenge is they don't know what they don't know. They know is it's coming. So a lot of these guys, they're going to their C-suite, and when their C-suite is saying, "What are your initiatives for next year?" I guess digital transformation again, and they're going, "Actually, no, it's cybersecurity. My number one concern that's keeping me awake at night right now is cybersecurity." The C-suite are responding with, "But we don't have a problem," i.e., we've never been hacked. And the IT people are going, "But it's going to happen." "What do you mean it's going to happen? That's your job." "Yeah, but statistically, it's going to happen. We're doing everything we can to try and be prepared, but we don't know what we don't know, and it's going to happen." The C-suite will often say, "Well, how much money do you need for that?" "I don't know. We really don't know. We need to gauge it. We need to work it out." "Okay, what's the best way of working that out?" "What do you mean? What's the best way of finding out what we need to spend on cybersecurity without spending it?" Yeah, penetration test. "How much is that?" "Well, about £1,500 for a day's work." "Get one of those done then." And the C-suite all of a sudden think, when the pen test comes back and it goes, "You're fine," problem's gone away. And that's not the case, because it just means that on the day that the pen test was done, that everything's okay. And unfortunately, it can lull the organization into a false sense of security. So it's our job to help, our partners get into a position where you're able to go and have these regular, meaningful conversations with the IT people to give them the tools so that they're ready for the conversations with the C-suite, so that the C-suite realize that this wave is coming. And if we end up a victim of ransomware, we're in trouble. So what do we need to do for that not to happen? That's where the next opportunity is, not just for us, but for you and for 186 Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking cybersecurity with most of my clients a couple of years now. I mean, my business is 4 years old this month, and cybersecurity is something that everybody should be, taking note of, because, like you said, it is going to happen to. Let's face it, it's going to happen to everybody eventually. Whether they're a business, whether they're a consumer, they're going to get attacked one way or another. I see it all the time on social media. "Oh, my business has gone down because my Facebook page has been hacked." Your Facebook page hasn't been hacked. It's just you haven't secured it well enough, which means somebody's been able to take it over.
Yes.
So yeah, cybersecurity and education around cybersecurity is so important. And I've been pushing, password managers, multi-factor authentication. Just those two basics alone will help a business, especially a smaller one, so much. Right. If you could give one piece of advice to the listeners or the viewers, because this will be going out on YouTube as well, what would it be?
Do you know what? I'm going to go further than that. I'm going to give you two, because the second one's very short, and it just summarizes what we've just spoken about there. The first one is really about customer experience. It's about unified communications. It's about, if you're an organization that is going through ISDN switch off right now, and you're thinking, we need to move to the cloud because the connectivity is going off in 18 months time, 2 years time, whatever it is. Don't switch for the sake of switching. Think about this in terms of strategy. Think about the technology that you want to deploy in terms of customer experience. Think about, and when customer experience, I mean both internal customers and external customers. Go back to the drawing board. Don't base your building your requirements for your next technology on your knowledge of your existing technology, because you as a customer don't know what you don't know. Leave that to the professionals. Leave it to people like yourself, Tony, who understand the art of the possible because of the vendor education that you have from our ecosystem. You have the ability to go into those customers and say, understand their business, understand their strategy, and be able to say to them, but what would it mean to you if the technology could do this for you? What if it could do that for you? Because at that point, I guarantee those customers will, because they don't know, will say, is that possible? Who does that? What a great segue for you to go, well, I know vendor A, B, or C who can do that. Would you like a meeting? And so think about technology in terms of what it can do to your customer experience strategy is piece of advice number one. Piece of advice number two is simple. Don't click on emails that have promises of riches in them.
Yep. People still fall for them.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. I always say that, I'd have to be half asleep to be caught by a phishing email, because for me they're so obvious. But I'll tell you what, they're getting more sophisticated. And sometimes the only way of finding out that it's a phishing email is actually to take the email, click forward, and then actually go and look at the email. Click reply, then go and look on the email that's going to be replied to, and you'll see that it's a nonsensical, made up domain, etc. And you just go trash. Never ever reply to those. Never reply to them. Actually, physically reply to them, because all you're doing is confirming that you are a target.
Yeah.
So just delete them. Just don't click on. Don't. I saw one recently in Facebook Marketplace. Again, example of how sophisticated they're getting. Remember when Wilco was going into administration and closing down? There was an advert in Facebook Marketplace, closing down sale, come and buy e-scooters, previous price £700, £29.99. Now, a lot of people, most of the reasonable world, would go, that's ridiculous. That's not real. But some people who really want an e-scooter would go and buy one. The e-scooter wouldn't turn up, but it's £29.99. I'm not going to chase that. So they're getting very sophisticated.
They are. And I think I talked about that actually in a previous episode or something similar, because there were a number of scams going on when Wilco was put into administration. So it's good that you picked up on that. For anybody that's listening that is an MSP or looking to get more involved in the UCCC space, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, so they can contact us, info@186, that's number 1, number 8, number 6, KLOUD, 186cloud.com. So that's our email address, info@186cloud.com. The message I always suggest to MSPs is, you might have your preferred go-tos. You might think that Microsoft is your answer for telephony, communications. You and I know it's not necessarily the right answer, because Microsoft have outages. It's an expensive solution. It's 4 nines SLA rather than 5 nines. It's not enterprise class. Our vendors can integrate into the back of Microsoft Teams and give you that telephony experience. One of them, for example, Ring Central, can even means you don't have to go and upgrade the Teams telephony license to integrate with telephony. They'll give you a free plugin to enable you. So it doesn't need to be expensive. If your previous experience of telecoms is Mitel or Avaya, and you now think that the world has moved on, well, we can show you how to engage in customer conversations around current vendors.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking time out. We're recording this of an evening, so I appreciate, it's technically personal time. So thank you so much for taking that half hour or so out of your evening to come on the show. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll have to catch up properly over a video coffee very, very soon.
Yeah, and I won't send you an invoice for that, because, as you say, it'll be a video of coffee. Tony, it's been a pleasure. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Anytime you want me back to talk and talk and talk, I'd love to do so.
Sounds good. Brilliant.
Thank you.
our tip of the episode. Wow, what an interview. Before we get on to today's tip, I just want to take a minute to thank Stephen for his time. Nobody that comes onto the podcast do it for money. It's all completely voluntary, and I appreciate everybody that's taken their time out to help me on my little show. You will find, as always, all of Stephen's details within the show notes of this episode. Anyway, on to the tip. We were lucky there that Stephen left us with a couple of nuggets. The first one was related to your customer experience and linked with the ISDN switch off. They're about 2 years before the ISDN infrastructure gets turned off. And while you may have older equipment in your business, we're not saying go out and switch now. You don't need to switch for the sake of switching. Take your time. You need to understand what technologies you have now, and you also need to consider what you're going to need in 1 month, 12 months, 24, 36 months' time. You want to be future-proofing. You also need to consider not only your external customers, but your internal teams as well. There is no point in implementing a communication system that your external customers love from an experience perspective, but your internal teams don't, because it won't do basic things like link to your CRM, for example. His second tip was all about phishing scams, and I've said this hundreds of times already, but if you get an email and the contents appear to be far-fetched, too good to be true, or you're not quite sure, then there's something to be concerned about. If you're ever in doubt about any phishing email, you can report it to the National Cybersecurity Centre, who will look at it. And if it's a phishing email, they will try to do something to stop it. All you have to do is forward the email to report@phishing.gov.uk. You can send as many suspicious emails as you like to them, and they are okay with you sending emails that you feel are suspicious, even if you're not certain that they're a scam. They can check. But remember, don't click on any links within a suspicious email. And also, anything that hits your spam or junk folder should just be deleted and not forwarded, if it's definitely spam. That's it. Here we are. The end of another episode. Thank you again for watching or listening. I truly hope you found this episode insightful, and I look forward to speaking to you again next time. As always, I do have one small favour to ask. If you have enjoyed this episode, do you know what? Even if you haven't, please let me know. Leave a comment or a review. It's the only way that I can get any better. And if you haven't already, give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I've been Tony, the IT Smart Guy, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the IT Smart Guy podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do consider to like and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice.